Hello, this is Dr. Mike, and this is week 5 of From My Perspective in Native American History. And I welcome you to this time together where we kind of talk about things that we need to talk about, um, not only in the history, but also in course materials and assignments. And this week is no different because you have your comparative essay. And I haven't said a lot about that, and the timeline may sneak up on you a bit, but you do have a little extra time, so don't freak out over the deadline that's due. I can give you a little bit of leeway. Having said that, you're to pick two documents from the primary documents, and that's what you're writing about. You're sharing the perspective of two writers from the time and how they kind of uh, coalesce together or how they're different, those kind of things. And so I think you will find that very interesting. You have some great resources in Townsend's writings and in our textbook, and you can go and find documents there that I think will be helpful to you. As general writing conventions, be sure that you follow basically standard writing. Chicago Turabian is important, especially if you're a history major. I gave you a list in the announcements and also in the document that I've emailed to you about the basic parameters. And you guys are old hats at this. This is not a freshman class. You've written tons of papers, and so most of you don't have a problem with that. But just be sure that your introductory paragraph of your thesis sentence are as clear as you can make them. When you look at two documents, you want to include in your discussion of that introductory paragraph what you're comparing in particular. And so it's a science that as you get older in academics and go further, that you get better at. And I think most of you will not have a problem with that. So please let me encourage you to look at that sentence, that document, and follow it as far as what the paper should look like. So much of what you do depends upon the look, and it's important that you get that right, and then of course get your details and your history right. Remember, in writing history, you don't use a lot of adjectives. I liken it to being a surgeon. You operate, you open the patient, you get in, you do the business, you get out without being overly, uh, you know, superfluous. And this is not an English paper; it's a history paper. So basically, you're writing as a history professional and as a historian. So let me encourage you to work on that and develop this skill as you go forward. If you're a history major, I'm particularly interested in you developing your writing skills because it will mean so much to you in your coming academic career. I hope some of you are thinking about going to get a master's in history, and I hope you will have as good an experience as I did with that at Clemson. We had such a great staff there and great teachers, and I left there really being blessed to be among that number and to call them my friends and to be actually working in the field that many of them have given their lives to do that. So work on your paper. Have any questions? Of course, you can always call me and you can or email me, and I'll get back with you and give you whatever help you need. This week we have been talking about the removal, the Trail of Tears in particular, for the 5 civilized tribes in the southeast, and then of course others are going to be removed. As we go forward, you're going to see a development almost as a federal policy of extermination and removal. We make the comment. I think someone made the comment about the French, the Louisiana Purchase in the early 1800s when Thomas Jefferson purchased the entire, almost double the size of the country, basically, with a purchase from Napoleon in France. And the Native Americans were outraged because no consideration was given whatsoever to them owning the land or them living on the land. It was just a land purchase that was now free to open to settle and explore and enlarge the country. There is no concept at all that Native Americans live there, own it, and it goes all the way back to the early days, as I say repeatedly, concerning the views of land ownership from the English, who believed that if you did not use the land, then it was free for the taking because they didn't have land, they didn't have open land in England, and by the time they're coming here, they're also walling it up into these small parcels that are going to, you know, further tightened the boundaries because most of the land was in the hands of the nobility, and you leased or was a long-term tenant of that land if you farmed it or whatever. But land ownership was a mark of wealth and acceptance and making advances in the world. And we're just getting into that idea of progress. Most people look at me kind of cross-eyed when I talk about the fact that before 1800 and the Enlightenment, there was no real idea of making progress in the world. A lot of it had to do with the religion. Religion changed. It's going to change dramatically in the midst of the Second Great Awakening, which occurs in the early 1800s, about the value of the individual. We failed to understand one very interesting point, and that is that the Anglican Church, which was in power in England, made no provision for what they would call the rabble or the riffraff or anyone below that were poor. You're going to see, if you study the American history side of this of this time, that they dumped their debtors from debtors' prisons in Georgia with their families without even knowledge on how to raise a pea, do farming. These people had no skill. Result, many of them died, left a bunch of orphans. And this led the way for John Wesley and George Whitefield to come. Both of these were Anglican prelates, to come to the country and open an orphanage. And so they traveled up and down the East Coast, raising money for this orphanage for these children. And they preached for the first time to the masses. And as they preach to these people, they come to faith in Christ and the religion. And so this started the Second Great Awakening, and it changed how people thought about themselves. They were now worthy of heaven. They were not fodder for hell, which is the old Calvinistic view of predestination and election, that you're born into the world either fodder for hell or a prospect for heaven, and you can't change that, and there's nothing to do. And it's a fatalistic kind of a deal in which many people lived in. And so there was no point in going. You went to an Anglican church, there was no areas for the riffraff to even attend service. The wealthy owned their own pew. They had a key and a lock, and they unlocked the gate on the pew in the mornings, and your family sat there for the worship, and you locked the pew back, and there was no provision made for the millions of people. So there is a big change in the outlook of people, brought along mainly and largely by this idea of the First Great Awakening. And then the second one's going to move it even further afield to where the gospel is going to be a whosoever will can come. And so this is going to greatly change people's aspects. It begins them thinking about freedom and liberty. The First Great Awakening had a marked effect upon the founding of the country, but it didn't change how they viewed Native Americans, African Americans, and later Asian Americans. And as a religionist and someone who studies American religious history, the most mind-boggling aspect of what I study and do is why your religion did not make any bigger difference in things like your relation with your fellow man. When as a Christian, you're supposed to love each other and care for each other. And yet skin color is going to become more and more in the early 1800s a definer of potential and of human beings. And so it starts with the black man, and he's pretty much consigned to slavery, and it's not a huge jump from black to red man. And so as you read through this, you will see many, many interesting points about how the Native American is treated with disdain and with hatred. And then when they fight back, it is an organized affront to the white man. How dare they attack us and kill us? And it becomes more and more about genocide, wiping them out, moving them off the land, getting them west of the Mississippi was the first barrier. And then after the Civil War, people began to pour into the West as a safety valve to get over the Civil War. So that in coming days, you're going to see the last Indian resistance is going to be Wounded Knee, about 1889. And they're pretty well conserved to the reservations. And pretty much that's the end of it until we get to the 1950s, when Native Americans begin to make some leeway in winning court cases and getting some of their sacred sites back. And it's still not resolved, and will never be. We can't go back and fix the things that we have messed up in the past. And so basically, there's a lot of things that revolve around this. And so as you read this, I hope that it will give you some heart for Native American peoples and what they've been through and what we put them through in taking their land. But there's absolutely no concept of them owning anything. It is there for ours to take. And I guess the last land that was paid for might have been the Dutch buying Manhattan way back in the beginning, but there certainly won't be any payments made for land thereafter. So hopefully, as you read your book, hope you're reading also your alternate text. We'll spend the time talking about those maybe in our next, from my perspective, to help you get ready for the exam. But we're in week 5 of 8, so be sure that you're working towards your identifying terms and other things, getting ready for the exam. If I can help you, I am much happy to do that, and I'm available. So please just let me know. Thank you.